Edward Djerejian is a former U.S. ambassador to Syria. He joins us now from Houston, Texas. Forgive me, sir, if I didn't quite get your name right there. But thousands of pro-Assad demonstrators out on the streets of Damascus and other cities in Syria today. From your experience of the country, who might these people be?
Well, I think many of these people are people in the middle class, if you will, government servants, public servants, and others. But the regime is orchestrating these popular demonstrations in support of President Bashar al-Assad in the wake of his most recent speech, in order to make the point that there is support for the regime in contrast to the widespread protests throughout the rest of the country. I think it's very important to note that the critical factor will be what happens in Damascus and Aleppo, the two major cities in Syria. To date, these cities have not witnessed wide-scale protests. There's a heavy security presence in both these cities, but at the same time, this will be a true turning point in the protest movement if these cities move. So the regime is trying to show that it does have support, and then to have people accept President Bashar al-Assad's bid for a dialogue.
You say that there's quite rightly that there's been no large-scale demonstration in places like Aleppo at the moment. Much has been made in the media of the lack of momentum on the part of the anti-regime protesters. They seem to lack that decisive groundswell of support that would overwhelm the regime. To what extent do tribal politics and loyalties come into play in Syria in a way that they didn't in Tunisia and Egypt?
That's a very good question, and I think that's part of the equation. The opposition is very diverse. It is partly tribal. You have Kurdish protesters. You have, if you will, a tribal aspect in terms of the northwest of the country, Sunni groups that have been protesting in and around Homs and Hama and in the northwest. That is part of the equation. I think one of the factors here is that there is if you will, a deep-seated concern in Syria and outside of Syria that if there is chaos and the regime crumbles, that there could be widespread sectarian violence akin to two neighboring states of Syria, Iraq and Lebanon, in different periods. But having said that, there's no question that the protest movements in Syria are real, they are strong, they have been spontaneous, and the fact that the opposition is not unified, you have the group in Antalya, which includes the opposition from abroad, members of the Muslim Brotherhood. You have a group of well-known opposition figures in Damascus who have been contacted by the regime to open up this dialogue. And then you have the street that is at best represented by the local coordinating committees. I think at the end of the day, the judgment is going to be made by these street organizations, the protest movements that are more diffuse. They do not have leadership, but that is going to be akin to what we saw in Tunisia and Egypt.
Okay, so I want to ask you one more question. I need you to give me a brief answer, if you can, please. What of Turkey's role in this crisis in Syria? How much influence does Prime Minister Erdogan have over Bashar al-Assad, and what advice do you think he will be giving him as a former US ambassador to Syria, particularly concerning Syria's relationship with Iran?
I think Turkey's influence in the situation is the most important of any outside country. I think President Gül and Prime Minister Erdogan have been in frequent contact with Bashar al-Assad and the regime. They are urging him to go beyond words and actually take very specific, demonstrable actions to establish a multi-party system and President Gül just sent a message to President Bashar al-Assad saying, not only establish a multi-party system, but say that you will abide by the results wherever they will go and try to get ahead of this political transition, or the consequences can be quite adverse.
So many thanks indeed. That's Edward Djerejian, former US ambassador to Syria.